Hello and welcome to Leave Your Mark. I'm your host, Scott Livingston, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Adam Douglas. Adam is the manager of sports performance with Hockey Canada's men's national teams. He has spent over 10 years working with both the men's and women's teams in strength conditioning and sports science role. He is responsible for building the physical performance plan for the U18 and U20 programs, including off-ice, as well as working with the coaches to understand the daily on-ice physical requirements to best prepare the players for short-term competition. During his years with Hockey Canada, he's been on teams in over 15 international competitions, including 2 Olympic Games, and supporting teams that have won 5 gold medals. Adam also works as an applied sports scientist for Catapult Sports, working and supporting ice hockey clients using the technology. In this role, he is responsible for driving research and innovation within the sport using wearable technology, alongside helping the clients deeper understand the data they are collecting. Prior to joining Catapult, Adam spent 9 years as the head strength conditioning coach at York University, and prior to that, he served in the same role with the Ottawa Senators Hockey Club. Above all his accomplishments, he's a husband to Colleen and a father to 2 little ones. I'm pleased to have him on the show today. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Scotty. Great to be here, and really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, my tongue is not working very well so far this morning, so I'm going to take a little glutch of water.
Usually for me, that just means I need a few more cups of coffee, and
exactly
the brain starts buzzing.
Yeah, I'm actually excited to have you on because it kind of completes the cycle of we hosted that summit that we were talking about before we got on the line on hockey performance, and I've pretty much interviewed everybody in that group, and you're one of the outstanding professionals who's really done a lot of interesting stuff in Canada with hockey in the last 20 years or so. And I'm kind of curious, you sent me a great email with a lot of background. I'm curious how you got into that world and crafted that world for yourself. And actually, when I read it, it didn't mention where you grew up, but did you grow up in Ottawa or Kingston or somewhere else?
I grew up in Mississauga, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I live in Oakville now, and I'm about 15 minutes from my parents' house where I grew up. So Mississauga born and raised, and my travels have taken me to Kingston at Queen's University for my undergrad, and then up to Ottawa, then to Oakville, and out to Calgary, and back to Oakville now.
Yeah. So you were a hockey kid playing hockey. Your brother, you mentioned your brother played a lot, or you played a lot?
Yeah, I was a master generalist when it comes to sports. I would say both my brother and I were blessed with hard work and hustle, which has gotten us pretty far in our careers in both life and sports. My dad was a big hockey player. My dad actually played for the Kingston Frontenacs, played at Queen's University as well. And so hockey from him has always been a big thing. My brother and I we took to football. And so we started playing football in high school. We played hockey all growing up, but the highest level would have been rep hockey. But when we got to high school, we played football, and that's what we continued on to at university. And coming back to the heart and hustle, that's what got us onto those teams in university. We weren't the biggest, we weren't the fastest, we weren't the strongest, but we learned, and I learned it a lot from watching my brother, that can take you a long way.
Yeah, I was reading the stuff from Queens. I didn't realize that you went to Queens, and then the connection with Rodney Wilson, who's my wife Jamie's best friend from growing up and stuff. And how was you played ball at Queens, and then you blew your ACL out? Is that it?
I had I would call it a short-lived career. So in first year university, I was basically on the scout team until I played the last game. So again, heart and hustle, they kind of rewarded a few of us that year, and I got to play that last game. My brother was in third year at the time, and he was a roster player, more a special teams type player, again coming back to that heart and hustle. But I learned that you can get a long way through hard work and learning the game. And so putting time in to learn and understand the game, that set me up well for my second year. And it was the first or second day of training camp. One of the last drills of the day was a punt and cover drill, special teams drill. Running down, I planted my right leg to cut left and fell, and that was it. And this was early 2000s. So like I still, remember vividly it, but that was it for that whole year. And rehab to come back. And the frustrating part was I had put myself in a really good position to succeed, and that injury happens. And then rehabbed back, was, working hard, working diligently in the gym, working with the coaches. And I had a freak injury playing softball that summer that I blew my rotator cuff out. Blew it up, absolutely blew it up. And so those two injuries back to back pretty much were the nail in the coffin for me. Still tried to work hard, still tried to come back, but 2+ years out of the game in, somebody who doesn't have the requisite talent to be the best always and needed to work through it. It was a lot to overcome. And, it certainly forged me a little bit on my career path as a strength and conditioning coach, because, we had a strength coach at Queen's, but she was also the track coach, and individualization of programs wasn't a thing back then. So I had to do a lot of my own work, a lot of my own research. How am I going to get back? Had a great physiotherapist that helped me through both of those injuries, and really started to kind of plant some of those seeds of what do you need to do to get back on the field. It's not just squat, bench press, cleans, all that kind of stuff. And then I figured, okay, if it helps me and I can't help my teammates on the field, I took a few under my wing, and we started training together, and we formed a little bit of a training group, and they let me experiment on them. And, this is pre-internet, right? Like we're talking early 2000s, the internet was there, but we were still researching in journals from the library. And so that kind of forged my path. And I connected up with Rodney. I think it was my third or fourth year. Must have been my third year. And I remember distinctly sitting in his office, and you and Jamie came by, and he introduced me, and you were with the Habs at the time. And, the work we did with Rodney was great because he was just starting kind of getting into that athlete training model. It was still so new back then. And so working with Rodney at that time as an undergrad student, I was doing personal training with him because he was still running kind of the fitness lifestyle side of things. So I was getting some coaching hours. We weren't calling it coaching back then because it was just training. And we were training people, and him and I started to kind of work on this athlete concept and that complete athlete. What does that look like? And so that was kind of my first opportunity at Queen's to experiment and kind of dip my toe into the athlete training waters.
So were you in a sports science degree at the time, or did you have to sort of shift your educational process?
It was so at that time it was physical and health education, which is now the School of Kinesiology. But, for me, we're a Queen's family. My parents went to Queen's. My older brother went to Queen's. So I went to Queen's. But, my dad and my brother are businessmen. Heavy, successful businessmen. So I kind of the black sheep and was like, I don't like numbers and all that stuff. So let's figure out the human body. I really liked biology in high school. And I was kind of on the path to be a PT or AT until I still remember I was in second year university. We took this theory and methodology of weightlifting, the class was called, taught by Mel Torcolacci, track coach, the de facto strength and conditioning coach before that existed at the university. But Anthony Slater was an upper year student. I don't know if you know Anthony.
I know Anthony well. In fact, he came up and did an internship or not an internship, but a few days with me before he went down to Exos, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember he came back and did a presentation to the class about his intern experience and blew me away. And I was like, wait, this is actually a thing, training people and working with athletes. And I was playing football, and Exos is a football factory. So, at that time, that was their big thing. And he got to do a lot of that, just blew me away. And that's the first time I remember being like, wow, I need to experience this and look into it. I remember at the end of that year, we had to do a full yearly periodization plan. And I would love to be able to dig that up somewhere to look at that and see what second year Adam put together. But that was my first taste. And then Anthony and I connected, he had another year or two He was playing hockey at the time, and I was still playing football. And so we connected really well. And then he obviously transitioned that to, I think he's still with Exos somewhere.
Yeah. He's living in Africa now, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was the first time. And then, once I kind of wrapped up, and I still had in the back of my head that maybe I could make a comeback for football, I decided to do an internship as well. I went down to Florida at a place called Chris Carter's FAST program. Chris Carter being the NFL receiver. We talk about attention to detail and the birth of the internet. I missed the athlete's performance at the time, their internship deadline. And Anthony, emailed them and they said, listen, like, there's nothing we can do. I one of those where I was sitting on the fence. Do I need to work? Can I do this internship? What can I do? And I missed it. And so, but fortunately I went down to Florida and had an unbelievable experience. It was a small facility, got to work with a ton of high level NFL clients because that was, Chris Carter's background and what they did. And I distinctly remember the internship coordinator at the time, her name was Jasmine. She sat me down at the end of my internship and said, would you like to come back after, you graduate in a year? We'd love to have you back. You did a great job. I said, I don't know. Like, I love Florida. Do I want to go down to the US? I just didn't really know. And she said, okay, well, my advice to you is if you want to stay in Canada, you need to learn the sport of hockey because that's their sport up there. And if you come down to the US, you're well positioned in football, you know the sport inside and out, you played it, but you have to learn hockey if you're going to stay in Canada. And that was great piece of advice because that's what I did. I'm seen now as a hockey guy, but at that time, everything I had done was football. I didn't even work with the Queen's hockey program. I was football all the time. That's who I was training. That's who my peer group was. And once I graduated from university, I realized, like, Jasmine's right, I need to figure out this hockey stuff. So that led me to the path of moving to Ottawa and getting a job with Lauren at the ACC because he was a de facto hockey guy. Mm-hmm. And who better to learn from at that time than somebody who had their own gym, was a big name in the sport. And this is 2005. And so, fortunately, I had a really good friends that had trained at the ACC during their university years as soccer players. I had friends in Ottawa, so it was an easy move to pick up and move once Lauren offered me that job. But, I would have been lost from that little piece there if Jasmine hadn't planted that hockey seed for me.
It's wild how you can have certain sort of these little interactions kind of domino and change your life at different points. It's a neat thing when you reflect back on them, for sure.
Yeah, just to follow up on that brief interaction, and this is something I didn't email you, so we might get there, but it was one of those brief interactions that set my path on with the Senators, and it links back to Queens, but I'll briefly tell this story, and then if we cycle back to it, we can get back to it. But Randy Lee at the time was the conditioning coach with the Senators, and I took a throwaway class in my fourth year of university called Leadership. It was taught by the business program as an elective, but taught by John Phelan. I don't know if you've ever
heard the name. Yeah.
John. Yeah. So he was early kind of sports psych, but leadership and teams and all that. And he had done some consulting work with the Senators, kind of, again, early 2000s. And I just took the class and we hit it off. He's a big rugby guy, big rugby background. But when I first met Randy, I remember him coming in the gym because Lauren was working with Wade Redden and Alfie and a bunch of the Sens guys during the summer. And, I'm just this first year little guy, but that's the Ottawa Senators strength coach. And, so I'm going to take a deep breath and just go introduce myself. And so I went over and he's like, I've heard about you. And I was like, oh, you've heard about me? He's like, yeah, John Phelan said, if I ever cross paths with you, I need to make sure I come over and say hi to you because, you left a good impression on him. And that started Randy and I's friendship, which ultimately ended up into a job. And, you never know where those small kind of connections and pathways can take you.
Interesting. I want to unpack that piece and go into the Senators thing a bit. Before I do that, I'm just wondering, did you recognize or discover you're like, you talk about the football background, and that's not an unusual. I mean, in fact, as you said, Lauren was a hockey guy, but he self admits he's a football guy too. But my background was football as well. But did you recognize your biases in football and how you had to sort of put them down, that lens of football, and actually discover hockey for what it is and isn't in comparison to football when you started working with hockey players?
Yes. And at that time, this is almost 20 years ago now. The world of training was so different too, and it was still just discovering itself. So I feel like I've kind of discovered and modeled along with it. For me, I still, when I'm training athletes, for me, strength underpins everything. And that's probably still taken over from my bias of football. But even for hockey, I want my athletes strong, and I want to build that base of that pyramid of strength for them before we get to the higher training qualities, because strength wins so much, and strength helps overcome a lot of things. And you have to shed that football side of things if you want to be successful in hockey, I think. Matt Nichols, another great example. He's a self-admitted football guy that's gotten into hockey, and it helped. But at the same time, especially when I was still at the ACC, I was still developing my toolbox so much that you could take some stuff in, put some stuff in. A lot more of the single leg training that Lauren was doing, a lot more kind of that balance and stability work. We had never done any of that, military press, bench, squat, clean, snatch. Like, that's the programs I had done from a football background. And then, working with Lauren and Randy, you see this single leg stability. The Bosu ball thing was still around then, but if you eliminate the Bosu ball, it's still single leg balance work with perturbations of different load or anything on it. So you get rid of that, but the strength is still the underpinning, and then I could take and pull from the toolboxes. And that's that when I look back on my time at the ACC, was exposure and allowing myself to experiment and build, my own core philosophy, but also, working with guys like John Zahab, J.R. Leger, Matt Price, when we were all there, it's just sampling from each of them. And it was such a formidable time for me, because I could build out that toolbox to help me as I developed as a S&C coach.
Yeah, I was curious, because for me, I mean, I recognized fairly early on in my career, working with those different sports, that, I mean, I had played football all my life and had played hockey, but football was my game as well. But the recognition that, football is a physical game. The nature of it is your physicality. And so you can overcome a lot of things on the playing field by the physical nature of your development and proficiency. Whereas hockey is really a skills game. And the more skilled you are, and there are so many elements of the skill, whether it's your puck handling, your visual field, and your ability to see time and space, and your ability to use your skates to their best benefit, and the efficiency of skating, and all these things that are so much different than football. And I recognized that it was less a physical game and more of a skills game. So that, for me, connected me more with understanding how much time on task had to be effectively aligned with the training those things. Whereas a football player, you really can sort of say, okay, they're going to train 6 days a week, heavy duty training in the off season to be prepared, because that's the physical nature of their game. Whereas a hockey player has all these other elements that they have to prepare. And so then you have to understand the piece of the pie. That was kind of my seeing of that. I don't know how that relates in your sort of growth and development as you've gone on. So
yeah, the skill of skating is what is ultimately unique to hockey, and the energy system demands are so unique to hockey, that those were the two biggest things. And I would say early on, I learned a lot from Matt Price about energy systems and conversations Lauren and I had. And when he went to Calgary and was really kind of shaped by Steve Norris and some of that thought process. And I was very fortunate that one of Matt's really good friends was still playing in the NHL at the time and training at the ACC. And when Pricer left, I kind of overtook his training, with Pricer still writing the program. So really got to dive into some of the deep energy system work that that Pricer was doing with him. And that was kind of my first formulation of that. And then the skill of skating, I would say, would, one of the first times I really started to consider that was some of the conversations I had when I was with the Sens, or with our general manager, about some specific players. And they're like, well, you need to work harder in the gym with player X because he's a bad skater on the ice. And I would say, well, shouldn't he be skating on the ice if we want to get him to be a better skater? Like, I can make him stronger. This is a veteran player. I'm not going to make him that much stronger, but if we can get him skating better, then isn't that what you want? So then, conversations about that and how to make the better players better, and exposing them to the specific tasks that they need to do is probably better than, working them in the gym because everyone thinks they're lazy.
Well, talk about, I know as you had noted in your thing that you get this job with the Ottawa Senators. I will always remember, actually, one of our first conversations was in the visitors gym of the Bell Center. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but the two of us were sitting in the back, and you guys were kind of struggling, and I could see in your eyes that it was a challenging year for you and stuff, and so you got it at a fairly young age. So just talk about getting the job, and then did you have this recognition of I'm in deep water here and I got to figure this out, or how is the process of that discovery for you?
Talk about diving, jumping off the boat in the middle of the ocean with no life raft. I look back now fondly at the time, but I quickly realized that the business of sport had changed. And I remember that conversation, sitting with you in that back gym. I also remember a conversation I had with Matty Nickel early on in the season. They were in Ottawa, and him and I were standing in the hallway chatting. And, we were just talking, and he was asking me, how the year was going. And he said to me, the one thing nobody ever teaches us when we get into this league is the culture of hockey and the different layers that you need to know and how to navigate those waters. You've got your equipment staff, you got the therapy staff, you got the coaching staff, you got the front office, you've got the players. How are we going to work through that? How are the expectations of the equipment staff plus the therapy staff plus you and the coaches? Like, how is all of that going to work? More importantly, how does that interact with the players and the layers that you have there? And it was my first real experience in the business of hockey, or the pro sport world. We didn't have assistants back then. It was one person. Randy had moved to director of player development, so he was around to help me, but he was also down in bingo a lot. So I was kind of left to kind of fend for myself, and made a lot of mistakes, a lot of relationship mistakes, a lot of just not knowing what to do at certain periods of time that they can't teach you, that you only really know. And it was, I don't want to say I was set up to fail, because I don't think that's right. But looking back now, there was a lot that was wrong with the experience heading into it. I think if I could have had Randy as the head for one more year and myself as the assistant, that would have been great, because I could have learned the ropes a little bit more. It didn't help that we had a first-year head coach that got hired a week or two after me, and was the second choice of the team. He lasted till January before he got fired. We had an aging roster who had been in the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years prior. So there was still kind of that Stanley Cup hangover, people thinking we were better than we should have been. If the expectation was we are not going to be very good this year, we need to build up, but that wasn't it. They were still trying to chase the tail a little bit and chase the high. The new coach coming in was not a people person. He, communication wasn't a big thing. And my biggest takeaway when I look back now in the teams I work with Hockey Canada, I stress the value of communication to all members of the decision makers, and the need for that, because we didn't have it. I would hear things as people were kind of talking either in the gym or past my office or whatever. We'd have a workout plan. We wouldn't play very well. The coach would come in and he'd scrub the workout off the board and be like, you guys aren't working out. You need to go home and think about what we're playing. And we're like, wait a second. And so I'd be sitting in the gym waiting for everybody. And one of the players would pop their head in and be like, coach canceled workout tonight. And I'd be like, okay, I'll pack up everything that we have set out. And, so it wasn't a great environment. And even when this new coach came in, I vividly remember it was our first road trip with him. We were going up for like one of those 4 or 5 day swings that we're blessed with in the Eastern Conference. And we were sitting, so when you pull up to the airport, you park in the private hangar, and they have those like Mercedes Sprinter vans to shuttle us to the terminal. So I got there first, and there's 3 rows of seats. So I get in, and I climb to the back, so people aren't climbing over me in their suits and everything like that. So I'm sitting there, we're waiting. He gets in next, and he goes to the front row of the 3-seater and stares straight ahead. And I'm like, good morning, like, how you doing? He's like, good. Doesn't turn around. And it's him and I. And I remember, I'm like, okay, are you excited? Like, first trip, like, I'm just trying to spark conversation. He's like, yeah. Stare straight ahead. And I'm like, okay, there's 2 of us here. You've been here like 3 days. You were going on a road trip. Where's the conversation? Where's, so that didn't, start and end well for me, I guess. I remember, season ends, we didn't make the playoffs, and we're having our exit meeting. So we do all our exit meeting with the players. We've been working on individualized programs for the guys in the summer, which was new because at that point it was just booklet after booklet that would get released. But, I wanted to individualize things with the guys that we felt needed it. And so I was working on all this stuff, did all my exit meetings, coaches meeting with every staff member. And I was last, and he keeps putting it off, and he keeps putting it off. And in my head, I'm like, this can't be that good. He was going back to Alberta or BC or wherever his summer home was. And he's like, yeah, we got to do it. And, so he was sitting in his office, and I'm basically sitting in the video theater waiting. I've got nothing else to do. All my meetings are done. And I'm just waiting and waiting. I pop my head in. I'm like, hey, can we, have this meeting? I know you got to leave. He's like, yeah, I got 5 minutes. And he sits me down and he says, Adam, I'm not too sure about next year. I only had a 1-year deal. Again, a mistake that I made at the time was only signing a 1-year deal. But so my contract was expiring, and he's like, I don't know about you. Like, you're young, you're 26, and here you are in the National Hockey League. So I explained to him, and I'm like, it's a different career trajectory for strength and conditioning coaches versus head coaches. He's like, I just turned 40 and I just finished my first season in the National Hockey League. You haven't ridden the buses like I have. You haven't put in your time. It took me, 26 years or whatever of coaching to get where I am. And here I am, and here you are. And I said, it's different. Like, I know I haven't done it, but, I've got the experience. I've worked with the players. Here's all our stats of, how our team, even though we didn't get the results on the scoreboard, X number of players played 82 games for the first time of their career as veterans. We got buy-in for individualizations of programs. We bang, 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 bang. He's like, I don't know. I got to go. And so I'm like, okay, didn't hear anything. Get a call from him maybe a month later. We'd been training guys. We'd been rehabbing guys at the end of the year. And he called, and he was jovial. I was like, wow, he's decompressed. He's had a chance. He's chit-chatting. And he goes, is everybody set up for the summer? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, great. I got to go. Click. I'm like, oh, okay. Walk in the next day, and, Brian Murray, bless his heart, great man, called me into his office and said, the head coach wants to make some changes to his staff next year, and you're one of them. And I was like just devastated. Here I am, thought the call the day before was great with them, had all of our summer plans, and that was it. And talk about the rug being cut out from under you. I was 27 now. This is the first time I've ever probably failed at a lot of things, and something this big, which had been a career goal. You think you've made it, you're in the National Hockey League, and bang, done. And, but I decided at that point, I was going to help whoever was coming in. So, Randy, helped a lot. They hired Chris Schwartz to come in not too long after you. I went back to Scotiabank at the time, sat down with Randy and Chris, and went through everything with them. And, Tim Murray was the assistant GM. He walked by at the time and kind of called Randy out and was like, didn't we fire Adam? And Randy's like, yeah, but here he is. He's come back and is helping Chris with the summer. And they were like, oh, like that's good. And so, I was determined that, it's like anything, you never want to burn bridges, but like to this day, Schwartzy's a good colleague of mine. And I didn't want to burn any bridges. Like I understood enough that it was a situation out of my control. It's still gut wrenching, but it helped formulate the rest of my career. And I look back on that time now as it was a cool experience, a cool opportunity. It was a goal of mine to work in the National Hockey League. I'd certainly be smarter if we ever went back. But, a lot of those missteps and poor communications and run-ins that I had with coaches and other staff members have really formulated my relationships now with the teams that I work with Hockey Canada, because we didn't have good communication and suffered from it. So that's one of the things I stress up and down. How cohesive can the backroom systems be to help support us? And that's what we focus on now with Hockey Canada. I love it.
Do you think, in hindsight, if you could take Adam now and put him in that same year, you would have, what do you think circumstantially you would have done differently?
Oh, totally different. Number one, I'd be more confident in sticking up for kind of my expertise in my domain area. At that time, I just deferred a lot to the coaches because that's what I thought. The first time the coach wiped that workout off the board, I should have gone in and said, listen, you can't do that. It took 5, 10, 15 times for me to go in and say, what's going on here? And our guys need to work out. They don't see workout as punishment. He was coming from junior hockey where workouts were punishment. And so, to stress to him that these guys like working out, like they know they need to do it for their career. So let's continue that. So that would be a big one. And that's one of the things that I tell a lot of younger coaches is, as you move up, it gets harder to work with coaches just because, it's a business. And so everyone looks out for number one. So I would be stronger in my convictions a little bit. The way I managed some of those assistant coaching relationships, we had some former players. I would have leaned a little bit more on kind of those early retired former player assistant coaches more. I had a great relationship with our leadership group in Alfie. But my voice was muffled. I remember, when they chose to make the coaching decision, they pulled everybody into the locker room and, Brian addressed the team and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to bring up this other coach. We've canceled practice, but we're going to work out. And so I said, okay, guys, let's go in the gym. We'll keep the energy high. We'll do a good workout and we'll get out. And, Alfie joked, wow, Adam, this is the first time, we've heard you tell us what kind of what the direction of the day was. And so I took that as, I have to speak up more. And I can't just rely on the plan and those guys showing up and then talking to them when they're in the gym. And so that would be a big one too, is just, owning that process a lot more, and just the value of the relationship with the coaches. I guess all staff members, but, certainly in hockey, the cross appeal of physical performance in the coaching staff is huge. And, they still control a lot of what we do, but being able to help and assist them, coaches coached and the trainers trained at our time when I was there. And so the whole high performance mentality and that high performance model is what I would definitely try to bring in. And it would have improved that culture so much.
So you kind of bounce back from this and take a role at York University. This is after Lidstone leaves? Are you replacing Steve, or is that?
Yeah, there was one guy between Steve and I at York. He lasted 1 year, but so again, we go back to kind of those small moments that can impact. So when I was at the ACC, we trained Katie Weatherston, who was a national team player at the time, was on the 2008 Olympic team for Hockey Canada. We were one of those kind of approved training facilities. And so I started working with her. Hockey Canada, feedback got back to Hockey Canada that, I was doing a good job. And so they invited me to one of their camps, and it was a knowledge share. It wasn't an on ice camp, but they brought in myself, Steve Lidstone, Doug Stacy, Dave Humphreys, and Mark Powers as a skating coach. And it was basically like, and Jason Poole at the time was leading up the strength and conditioning for the women's program. And it's like, how can we be better? What do we need to look at? And how can we be better? No idea is a bad idea. Let's talk training. Let's talk skating. Let's talk everything. And Steve and I hit it off. And we've been friends ever since. That would have been 2007, I believe. And great friends and colleagues ever since. But he had just left to go to Mac. I had just accepted the job with the Senators, so I was just leaving. But I went to a camp out in Calgary, and again, Steve's there, Jason Poole was there, and again, we hit it off and worked closely together. And when I, lost my job with the Sens, my dad, as a businessman, was like, "We got to network again. Like, we got to get you going." I would have taken anything at the time, but the opportunity to work in this CIS U Sport area was intriguing. So I talked to Steve. We had stayed in contact throughout that year, and he was like, "Listen, the guy who they had hired for me at York was just leaving. I can kind of get your name in there." And fortunately, another member of the panel was Dan Church, who's the women's hockey coach, but he also is one of Hockey Canada's coaches. So kind of through Steve and Dan had heard from Hockey Canada, kind of, who I was and that sort of thing. I, interviewed well, did the practical piece, everything, got the job at York, a lot of it thanks to Steve and Dan and Hockey Canada. And then at that time, I started back at York in 2009. So right after right around that same time, I reached back out to Hockey Canada. Mel Davidson, has been a great mentor of mine over all these 10 plus years. I reconnected with them and started working with their women's program again, also through Dan at York. And so now I had left Ottawa. We'd moved to Oakville. My wife and I, there's nothing like getting fired and getting married and moving cities in the same summer. That was a big summer for us. And then so between Steve and I, and now Steve is at Mac, I'm at York, and I think at that point we're the only two full-time S&C coaches in the OUA for sure. There are a few guys that were kind of blending, like Rodney was blending that lifestyle and S&C piece, but our two portfolios were this. And I leaned very heavily on Steve for that first year. I started, my first day at York was the first day of classes. So September, the after Labor Day. And I remember going in and being like, "Okay, I'm here. Like, what do I do?" They're like, "Basketball team showing up at 12. They want you to test them." I'm like, "Okay, here we go." And fortunately, we didn't have any kids at the time. Actually, my wife was still living in Ottawa because, we were selling our house. She had to finish up her teaching contract till Christmas before they could get somebody in to replace her. And so I worked and built that program, and we started with like 3 teams, and then over the years had grown that up to, I think 13 was our peak at one point. And fortunate to be able to hire assistants, work with lots of good students. I was never able to build the program that Steve was able to do, just from logistics were different. It was different environment at York, but still very proud of what we were able to do over the 9 years that I was there.
Mm-hmm. I did the opposite of you. I got divorced, fired, and moved cities in the same year. So there's a talk about stress. There's a lot of stress there. I want to get into I'm really interested in the unpacking of the Hockey Canada piece in different ways. And rather than kind of going through the litany of years of, the technical that you delivered, what I'm curious about is what you recognized maybe early on, or took a while for you to recognize, the difference between, call it tournament play and tournament preparation and big event preparation, which is really what Hockey Canada is about, versus the sort of seasonal preparation of the National Hockey League or the college sports programming, where you have sort of this dedicated off season, everybody trains for their 82 games, their 24 games or whatever. They're different animals, and they have a sort of a different cultural romance or non-cultural romance in some sense about the things that you do or can do. I'm just kind of interested what you recognized right off the bat, and then over time recognized is really different and had to adjust the way you thought or worked with that kind of tournament play mentality.
Yeah, I would say there's two big things. Number one, you learn very early on, and it's drilled into you from a Hockey Canada perspective, that there's one medal that we win, and that's gold. And so that frames everything that we do, from the opening meeting to the way we plan our warm-ups and cool-downs, to the way we interact with the coaches, to the way we want the athletes to succeed. It's to win a gold medal. And, everyone says, oh, you lost, but congratulations on the silver. That doesn't sit well with us. And that's and everything from a Hockey Canada perspective is driven to win. And the second part relates to that, is that in short-term competition, the bandwidth for error is so small. You can't give any games away. And so you need to prepare and plan for every game as it's that gold medal is on the line. Because certainly, on the women's side, you can argue that it's a lot of the time is a 2-horse race, but a lot of those other countries are coming up, and you see the bandwidth for error when it gets missed. Last year in the women's Worlds, Hockey Canada won a bronze, and we lost the semifinal game to Finland. And so the margin of error is so small, and especially even more so on the men's side with our World Junior program. You look at this past tournament that we had, we were like the division of death, right? It was US, Canada, Russia. And there's no margin of error there. And we were actually just on a call the other day looking at this year's tournament. And we are in the other pool now. The tournament of death is Russia, Sweden, US. If you come second of our pool, you're playing one of those top teams. So we need to win our pool, which, Finland is one of the other top countries in that pool, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. And you lose that. If you come second, you're playing one of those top nations. So Canada versus any one of those top three is going to be a good game. And you lose that, you're out. It's quarterfinals at that point. And that's what happened to us in the Vancouver year. We lost to Finland in that quarterfinal game, which was a wild game, but we still lost and we were out, which isn't good for us. So everything needs to be framed that every game is a gold medal game. There's nowhere to slip. You can't take nights off like you can in the National Hockey League or in some of those other leagues. And so that needs to frame our preparation. We can't waste any day as we build a gold medal team. And so now one of the things that I do a lot is I work with our coaching staff to understand that what they do in their practices, because when we're preparing a team, the number one thing we do is expose them to practice, and that's their main driver of physical and technical and tactical preparation, that we can be strategic with what we do on those practice days to put ourselves in the best position to succeed. And I always talk about not wasting a day. And really, I've crafted our physical performance pillar around a concept I saw at the USOC event probably 4 or 5 years ago now by Ben Rosenblatt, who worked with British field hockey. And it's this concept of tournament durability, where the physical preparation needs to support the much needed technical and tactical. So everything I do and everything I work with our coaches allows our athletes to express the tech-tac outcomes the coaches want when they need it from the athletes. And that allows us to take this view of let's be our best every single day, and what can we do to make sure our athletes are durable enough to win a gold medal on December 26th and January 5th.
Cool. You mentioned a lot about how important your wife has been in your sort of quest for the holy grail of gold medals, and the Christmas holidays and the things that you've committed. And it was interesting because I went and read your purpose, which I'm sure if you've listened to my podcast, you know what's
Mm-hmm.
coming. You were born May 4th, so you are Taurus 4. Your purpose is to use your constant need for change and tension for a positive goal that will allow you to experience your personal truth and be a positive catalyst for others in their lives. You are unique, and if that is not fulfilled, then something has been lost, says Martha Graham, a true Taurus. With Taurus 4, the individual prevails. The challenge is for them to remain their own person while being part of a relationship. A born catalyst, the Taurus 4 has the power to affect change through ideas, experiences, and sometimes just by their presence. They may be shunned because they're provocative, but they'll never be accused of being boring. This dynamic is restless and in a state of constant flux. Few people can keep up with their ability to transform the moment, arriving in a new place and perspective while others are still trying to understand something the Taurus 4 discarded ages ago. They are often misunderstood, but with maturity, they begin to respect their ability to affect change. Hopefully, they use this ability in a positive way and not just to create trouble. These people reach a point in life when they don't care what others think. Their uniqueness brings them success. They bring excitement wherever they go. Their ability to handle many different things simultaneously astounds even their biggest fans. However, if they are indiscriminate and ruled by their need for excitement, they could find themselves wondering who is next to them in the morning. Too much togetherness makes them nervous. They need space to grow. Uranus tends to embrace ideas and causes rather than the personal or the intimate.
Wow.
After you told me about your so you must have found the right wife who knows you need to be unique and individual and to do your thing. So tell me about that relationship.
Yeah, that was amazing, Scotty. Thanks for sharing that. A lot of things to kind of unpack and look at. But firstly, with my wife, I can only do what I do because she handles the home front spectacularly. And you kind of mentioned the Christmases. So one of the things that I do with World Juniors is our tournament is over Christmas break and Christmas holidays. And this coming Christmas will be my 7th tournament with our World Junior team. My oldest son is 8 and my youngest turns 6 relatively soon. So if you do the math, it's a lot of Christmases missed. And my wife has picked up the torch and made sure that we have Christmas before I leave. We FaceTime. She sends me the videos of the school concerts that I've missed, and it's big, huge. I could not be where I am without what she's been able to hold down. And I can't remember if I told you this story or not, but my first World Junior experience was kind of defining for all of the 6 that have passed it. But my youngest son was born at the end of November. And I think the week he was born, I got a call asking me if I would be interested to leave in 2 weeks' time to join the team in Toronto. Fortunately, it was in Toronto. So we had this 2-week-old baby, and here I am saying, bye, honey, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. And that 6-week, kind of parental leave that I blocked off at university where we were both going to be home. Well, that's poof, that's gone because this is an opportunity that, has been presented to me. And fortunately, she's a big believer in what I do. And so she, was like, yeah, no problem. Because it was only going to be short term. Mm-hmm. So the initial ask from Hockey Canada at that time was 2 weeks. I was going to go home. I was going to help them during their pre-competition period, do some monitoring with them, work with the players, establish good habits. And then I was going to fly home from Montreal on Christmas Eve because they didn't need me anymore, right? They had never had somebody in a strength and conditioning, sports science role before. This was new. It was kind of they'll dip their toe in the water. We'll see how it goes. We'll keep you a little bit. So we had this end date. So my wife is like, yeah, you can go. You'll be home before Christmas. No big deal. It'll be a good opportunity for you. And, we get there with Hockey Canada and Kent Kabelka and Doc Ald, who work with the Calgary Flames now, they were like, yeah, this is new. They were veterans of the World Junior experience. And they basically said, keep your head down, do a really good job, and we'll see if we can keep you for the whole tournament. And in my head, I'm like, that's really cool. I don't know how that would go over at home because I just left my 2-week-old. But hey, you know what? I'm a giver. We'll give her and we'll see what happens. So I distinctly remember we were now in pre-comp in Niagara, and I live in Oakville, so like an hour away. And Bruce Hamilton, who was our general manager at the time, pulled me into the room and he said, you know, you're doing a really good job. We want to keep you, but you got to go ask your wife. And I'm like, no, I want to say yes now. And he's like, no, as a lifelong hockey man, you need to go ask your wife. So they gave me the night off. I borrowed one of the team cars, drove home, sat down, got to hold my baby, and then was like, so you know how I was planning on coming home at Christmas Eve? Well, they've asked me to stay. And she looked at me and goes, so I'd been with Hockey Canada now on the women's side for a while. She looked at me and goes, are you going to win? And I'm like, yes, we're going to win. And she's like, okay, you know, we'll make do. My mother-in-law came down and spent almost that whole month that I was away with them. My parents live 15 minutes away, so it was a very much a community-based time. And fortunately, we won. That was year, you know, we had Connor McDavid and Max Domi and Anthony Duclair, and we had a stacked team. And we ended up beating Russia in the gold medal. And, you know, one of the nice parts is if you have success, they don't necessarily just let you go after 1 year. So now I've been, you know, 7 years later. But, you know, the story that doesn't often get told is I remember driving to the Bell Center because that tournament was in Montreal that year. And, you know, I was calling to check in. It was Christmas. And my wife was like, I can't talk right now, Christmas morning. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I'm actually taking Cole, our youngest, to the hospital. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're taking him to the hospital. What's going on? Well, he's just, you know, his breathing was raspy and he just had a cold, but now he's 3 weeks old. So I'm talking to, you know, our team doctor and he's talking me down. And my wife's like, don't come home. Like it's Christmas Day. You know, you got practice, tournament, everything. And so I always joke now, tongue in cheek, I will never win a Father of the Year award because my wife spent that Christmas not too long at the hospital, but she still, you know, reminds me periodically. But you know, this is a person who has moved over and back across the country. You know, she's a teacher, which is fortunate, but she was able to take 6 years off through, you know, union leaves and all of that, and time built up to spend at home with our kids. And you know, we could not have done any of that without her sacrificing a lot of that. And you know, she loves being at home. She's an amazing mom, and lets me, you know, kind of do everything that I do, you know, spending a lot of time working on my academic stuff and you know, schooling for 7+ years and graduate work. You know, there's stuff she needed to keep up because I had work that I had to do on top of my job at the university, which is intensive coaching, plus my Hockey Canada job, which is intensive travel. And, you know, her and I talk now and, you know, we look back on everything. And during this COVID period, we were joking and we were talking. We think this is the longest consecutive time I've been home since 2013.
Wow.
Which is crazy and wild. And you look back and you're like, wow, you know, and, you know, Mike Boyle always says, you know, I can't remember what his direct quote is, but, you know, make sure you are where your feet are, or, you know, you can't chase all that stuff. But I would never have been able to do it without her and someone who's understanding and loves being home and has really championed that home front.
So what's your love affair with and what you do? Like when you look at who you are and who you've become professionally and what you do, and obviously you have to sacrifice numerous things in order to be able to do a master's and a PhD and work for Hockey Canada and do all the things that you do. Like, what are you in love with that keeps you going when things are a little bit more difficult than?
I love the team aspect. And, you know, I remember that's one of the things that I really loved about the job with the Senators, because you're part of that team. You're in the heart of competition. And I remember when I left that and was working with the university, I didn't have that. And that was one of the reasons why I loved getting back in with Hockey Canada is because I had that team concept again. The interaction with the athletes towards a common goal, which is that gold medal, working with the coaches, working with the support staff. And over the years, cultivating those relationships with people. I have lifelong friends through the sport of hockey that, I value their friendship so much. One of the things that we've done during this COVID period is there's been a group of us, therapists, equipment managers, and me. I'm kind of the black sheep of that group, but we have a standing call every Wednesday night just to check in with everybody. Some people are older, some people are younger, some people have different family situations where they're by themselves. And so collectively, we started this Wednesday night group, and it's just a Zoom call, but we check in from all over the country and just to check in on each other and say, hey, and what's up. And so being part of that team for the greater good is I think what continues to drive me. And, the people I've met in the sport of hockey is, second to none. And, everyone, especially with what we do, is about giving up what we do to make other people better. And, that's what drives me, is to help people be better. And one of the things that when I have to I'm a constant with our group, but we get in different athletes in every year. I always say my job is to make you the best you can. So when the time comes, the coaches can get the best out of you. And so that's what drives me, is to put those players in a position to succeed and do what they do best. And so that's my main driver.
What do you consider your unique ability that allows you to, shine in an environment like a team? What do you bring to the table you think's unique about you?
I think there's a few things. I think number one, I can talk hockey, so speak coach. And that's one of the things I challenge a lot of younger developing strength coaches to do, is learn the language of the sport and how to talk that back. I can take all of these complex monitoring problems, go into a room with our coaching staff and dial it down so they understand it and how it can impact what they do. And I think that's one of my strengths, is just being able to communicate those high level concepts back to them and to the players. The message, I can deliver the same message to our coaches one way and our players the other way. And it's different, but it's the same. And I can kind of do that. And I think that's one of my big strengths. I also think it's consistency. One of the things I try to do with my practice is allow athletes to thrive off a routine. So our warm-ups will always start at the same time before they hit the ice. We'll follow the same flow. We'll have that consistency for them to rely on when, the rubber hits the road or chaos ensues in a tournament. I want them to have that consistency and that calm, not necessarily a calming presence. I'm not a yeller and screamer, so I guess it is a calming presence, but they know 40 minutes before, regardless of the pressure of the situation, the game that we have, if it's a gold medal game, we're going to start our warm-up 40 minutes before they go on the ice, because that's what we've always done. And so, whatever they need to do, whatever headspace they need to get into for that, we're going to help them start their preparation of the game, regardless of when it is, it's going to be that. And so we're trying to impose, what I do into this routine base, so it's not all over the place. And I think it's stabilizing too, because I've done it now for 10 plus years, but 7 on the men's side. So coaches can be like, okay, you're going to do this. Let's build the rest of our stuff. So they know when their video is, they know when they need to hit the players. And then when they come to me, it's, we have that consistent routine built in.
That's awesome. Well, an hour flies by when you're having fun conversations. So this has been, it's been great to unpack some of your life. And that's my selfish benefit of doing the podcast, is to get to know the people across from me a little bit better. So
no, thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. I'd love if you could send me that quote, that stuff that you were reading there. That was you talk about the uniqueness, and I had a little chuckle in my head when you'd mentioned that uniqueness part. I was like, yeah, you ask my wife or you ask my mom, certainly they'll both agree with that statement, that I bring a uniqueness to environments.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'll send it to you and you can show it to your wife and see if she nods a little bit. Have a good rest of your day. Appreciate your time, buddy.
Thanks, Scotty. I really appreciate it. Great job. Keep it up.
Take care.